សូមក្រាបថ្វាយបង្គំសម្ដេចព្រះសង្ឃរាជទាំងពីរគណៈសម្ដេចព្រះសង្ឃនាយកសម្ដេចព្រះសង្ឃនាយករងព្រះធេរានុត្តរគ្រប់ព្រះអង្គជាទីគោរពសក្ការៈសូមថ្វាយបង្គំសម្ដេចព្រះបរមនាថនរោត្តមសីហមុនីព្រះករណាព្រះមហាក្សត្រនៃព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជានិងសម្ដេចព្រះមហាក្សត្រីនរោត្តមនាថសីហនុព្រះអមរវីររាជមេដាជាតិខ្មែរជាទីគោរពសក្ការៈសម្ដេចឯកឧត្តមលោកជំទាវសមាជិកសមាជិកាព្រឹទ្ធសភារដ្ឋសភារាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលមន្ត្រីរាជការកងកម្លាំងប្រអាវុធគ្រប់ប្រភេទតំណាងគ្រប់និកាយសាសនាបងប្អូនជនរួមជាតិជាទីស្រឡាញ់នៅក្នុងឱកាសដ៏មហានក្ខត្តរិទ្ធនៃការប្រារព្ធពិធីអន្តរសាសនាក្រោមប្រធានវត្តសូមពិភពលោករួចផុតពីគ្រោះនៃជំងឺរាតត្បាតសកល COVID-19 និងអំពើជួញដូរមនុស្សក្នុងនាមរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាខ្ញុំសូមសម្ដែងនូវការអបអរសាទរនិងវាយតម្លៃខ្ពស់ចំពោះស្មារតីសាមគ្គីភាពនិងសុខដុមនីយកម្មគ្រប់ជាតិសាសន៍និងជំនឿសាសនានៅក្នុងព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាជាពិសេសស្មារតីជួយគាំទ្ររាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជានៅក្នុងគ្រប់កាលៈទេសៈក៏ដូចជាពិភពលោកដើម្បីសេចក្តីសុខក្សែមផ្សាននៃមនុស្សជាតិចាប់តាំងពីឆ្នាំ2017ជារៀងរាល់ឆ្នាំព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាតែងប្រារព្ធពិធីអន្តរសាសនាយ៉ាងអធិកអធមប្រឆាំងការជួញដូរមនុស្សកន្លងមកទូលបង្គំខ្ញុំប្រកាសណាខ្ញុំបានប្រគល់ភារកិច្ចនេះជូនសម្ដេចកលាហោមសខេងឧបនាយករដ្ឋមន្ត្រីក្រសួងមហាផ្ទៃនិងជាប្រធានគណៈកម្មការជាតិប្រយុទ្ធប្រឆាំងអំពើជួញដូរមនុស្សជាតំណាងក្នុងនាមរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជារួមជាមួយសម្ដេចព្រះមហាសង្ឃរាជទាំងពីរគណៈព្រះធេរានុត្តរគ្រប់ព្រះអង្គមេដឹកនាំគ្រប់និកាយសាសនាហើយអារម្មណ៍លោកជំទាវថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំមន្ត្រីរាជការពីគ្រប់ក្រសួងស្ថាប័នអង្គការមិនមែនរដ្ឋាភិបាលជាតិនិងអន្តរជាតិសង្គមស៊ីវិលវិស័យឯកជនរាប់ពាន់នាក់ដើម្បីធ្វើពិធីបួងសួងតាមបែបសាសនានិងប្រាជ្ញាចិត្តរួមគ្នាលុបបំបាត់អំពើជួញដូរមនុស្សក្នុងគ្រប់រូបភាពកម្ពុជាបានផ្អាកការជួបជុំទ្រង់ទ្រាយធំកាលពីឆ្នាំ2000កន្លងទៅដើម្បីអនុវត្តនូវវិធានការបង្ការទប់ស្កាត់និងដោះស្រាយបញ្ហានៃការរាតត្បាតជំងឺ COVID-19 ចូលក្នុងសហគមន៍នៅឆ្នាំ2021នេះវិបត្តិ COVID-19 នៅតែបន្តឆ្លងរាតត្បាតចំណែកការជួញដូរមនុស្សនិងអក្រិតកម្មឆ្លងដែននានាក៏កំពុងត្រូវបានជួនឆ្លៀតឱកាសប្រើក្រុមមធ្យោបាយដើម្បីទាញយកផលចំណេញពីស្ថានភាពដ៏លំបាកនេះទូលព្រះបង្គំខ្ញុំប្រកាសណាខ្ញុំយល់ថាវេទិកាអន្តរសាសនាត្រូវតែរៀបចំតាមគន្លងថ្មីដើម្បីក្រើនរំលឹកផ្នែកស្មារតីដល់ប្រជាជនគ្រប់ជាតិសាសន៍និងជំនឿសាសនាក្នុងព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាក៏ដូចជាប្រជាជននៅលើពិភពលោកដើម្បីផ្លាស់ប្ដូរហើយសម្របខ្លួនតាមបែបគន្លងថ្មីក្នុងសម័យ COVID ជាមួយនឹងការប្រកាន់ភ្ជាប់នៅស្មារតីមនុស្សធម៌សន្តោសន័យយកចិត្តទុកដាក់ដល់អាយុជីវិតនិងសេចក្តីថ្លៃថ្នូរនៃមនុស្សជាតិគ្រប់ជាតិសាសន៍និងជំនឿសាសនាក្នុងនាមរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជា ទូលព្រះបង្គំខ្ញុំប្រកាសណាខ្ញុំមានមោទនភាពចំពោះការរក្សាបាននៅភាពសុខដុមរមនានៃគ្រប់ជំនឿសាសនានៅក្នុងព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាតាមរយៈកិច្ចសហការយ៉ាងសកម្មជាពិសេសការអនុវត្តបានយ៉ាងខ្ជាប់ខ្ជួននៅវប្បធម៌ចែករំលែកពុំចេះរីស្ងួនជាមួយនឹងស្មារតីទទួលខុសត្រូវខ្ពស់ក្នុងគ្រាដ៏លំបាកនេះសម្ដេចឯកឧត្តមលោកជំទាវអស់លោកស្រីបងប្អូនជនរួមជាតិជាទីស្រឡាញ់ពេលនេះថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំមន្ត្រីរាជការគ្រប់លំដាប់ថ្នាក់បាននឹងកំពុងពុះពៀគ្រប់ឧបសគ្គដើម្បីដោះស្រាយបញ្ហាធំនៅក្នុងសង្គមជាពិសេសការបង្ការទប់ស្កាត់គ្រប់រូបភាពទៅនឹងជំងឺរាតត្បាតសកលហើយទទួលបានលទ្ធផលគួរឲ្យកត់សម្គាល់ជាបន្តបន្ទាប់ដើម្បីឲ្យប្រទេសជាតិនិងប្រជាជនយើងវិលត្រឡប់ទៅរកស្ថានភាពប្រក្រតីវិញជាមួយគ្នានេះរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលបាននិងកំពុងអនុវត្តយ៉ាងសកម្មតាមរយៈដៃម្ខាងរក្សាការពារសន្តិសុខសណ្ដាប់ធ្នាប់និងស្ថិរភាពសង្គមដើម្បីទ្រទ្រង់ជីវភាពប្រជាជននិងរក្សាស្ថិរភាពម៉ាក្រូសេដ្ឋកិច្ចនិងដៃម្ខាងទៀតប្រយុទ្ធប្រឆាំងជំងឺរាតត្បាតសកល COVID-19 តាមគ្រប់រូបភាពទាំងការបង្ការទប់ស្កាត់ការព្យាបាលនិងការស្ដារនីតិសម្បទាជនរងគ្រោះនិងសហគមន៍ដែលទទួលរងនៅផលប៉ះពាល់ដូច្នេះការដាក់ប្រជាពលរដ្ឋឬអ្នកត្រឡប់មកពីតំបន់មានហានិភ័យឲ្យស្ថិតក្នុងការធ្វើចិត្តលេខស័កឬការបិទគប់តំបន់ដែលមានអត្រាឆ្លងឬចរន្តនៃការឆ្លងខ្ពស់ឬផ្អាកការឆ្លងដែនខុសច្បាប់នៅក្នុងដំណាក់កាលនៃការរឹតបន្តឹងវិធានការការពារសុវត្ថិភាពមិនមានន័យថាជាការបំបិទសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពឬការរើសអើងដោយក្រុមជនអគតិបង្កបញ្ហាមួយក្រុមដែលមាននិន្នាការប្រឆាំងកັບមុខបាននឹងកំពុងតែឃោសនាមួលវង្កាច់បំបាក់ស្មារតីប្រជាពលរដ្ឋប៉ុន្តែនេះគឺជាវិធានការការពារសិទ្ធិរស់រានមានជីវិតសិទ្ធិទទួលបាននូវកិច្ចការពារជៀសផុតពីការឆ្លងជំងឺរាតត្បាតប្រកបដោយប្រសិទ្ធភាពទន្ទឹមនេះបន្ទាប់ពីការចាក់វ៉ាក់សាំងជូនប្រជាពលរដ្ឋចិត្តសម្រាប់តាមផែនការជាស្ថាពររាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលសម្រាប់ចិត្តសម្រាប់ឲ្យបាននៅគោលដៅចាក់វ៉ាក់សាំងជូនកុមារយុវវ័យអាយុចាប់ពី12ឆ្នាំនិងក្រោម18ឆ្នាំឲ្យបានមុនដំណាច់ឆ្នាំ2021ដើម្បីបង្កើតភាពស៊ាំកាត់បន្ថយការចម្លងចូលក្នុងសហគមន៍ធ្វើឲ្យប្រជាជនយើងមានជីវភាពប្រក្រតីឡើងវិញដើម្បីស្ដារសេដ្ឋកិច្ចគ្រួសារនិងសង្គមជាតិក្នុងនាមរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលខ្ញុំសូមថ្លែងនៅអំណរគុណចំពោះស្មារតីសាមគ្គីភាពនិងការជួយគ្នាក្នុងគ្រាក្រគ្រាលំបាកនៃបណ្ដាប្រទេសជាមិត្តដែលបានផ្ដល់វ៉ាក់សាំងទាន់ពេលវេលាជាពិសេសសាធារណរដ្ឋប្រជាមានិតចិនដែលជាប្រទេសឈានមុខក្នុងការផ្ដល់វ៉ាក់សាំងទាំងជំនួយមនុស្សធម៌ទាំងតាមការបញ្ជាទិញក៏ដូចជាប្រទេសជប៉ុនប្រទេសអង់គ្លេសប្រទេសអាមេរិកដែលធ្វើឲ្យកម្មវិធីចាក់វ៉ាក់សាំងប្រព្រឹត្តទៅលឿនជាងការគ្រោងទុកខ្ញុំសូមថ្លែងអំណរគុណដល់ស្ថាប័ននៃអង្គការសហប្រជាជាតិប្រចាំនៅកម្ពុជាជាពិសេសអង្គការសុខភាពពិភពលោក UNPA UNICEF អង្គការ FAO UNDP និងអង្គការដៃគូអភិវឌ្ឍន៍អន្តរជាតិនិងស្ថានតំណាង ពីបណ្ដាប្រទេសនានាក្នុងសកលលោកព្រមទាំងវិនិយោគិនបរទេសនិងក្នុងស្រុកដែលតែងតែនៅជាមួយកម្ពុជាសហការជួយដោះស្រាយក្នុងស្ថានភាពដ៏លំបាកនេះសូមថ្លែងអំណរគុណថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំនិងមន្ត្រីរាជការគ្រប់ក្រសួងស្ថាប័នអង្គភាពក្រុមគ្រូពេទ្យទាំងស៊ីវិលនិងកងកម្លាំងការពារជាតិកម្លាំងនគរបាលគ្រូពេទ្យស្ម័គ្រចិត្តអាជ្ញាធរសមត្ថកិច្ចគ្រប់ផ្នែកនិងមន្ត្រីជួរមុខតាមបណ្ដាខេត្តជាប់ព្រំដែនអ្នកបម្រើការតាមមណ្ឌលចិត្តលេខស័កតាមមន្ទីរព្យាបាលនៅសហគមន៍ក៏ដូចជាអង្គការមិនមែនរដ្ឋាភិបាលគ្រប់និកាយសាសនាវិស័យឯកជននិងសប្បុរសជនដែលបានលះបង់កម្លាំងកាយចិត្តធនធានសម្ភារៈនិងថវិកាដើម្បីជួយជ្រោមជ្រែងរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលដោះស្រាយគ្រប់បញ្ហានិងគ្រប់ដំណាក់កាលសូមថ្លែងអំណរគុណចំពោះគណៈកម្មការជាតិប្រយុទ្ធប្រឆាំងអំពើជួញដូរមនុស្សថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំសាសនាអង្គការការិតាសកម្ពុជានិងអន្តរជាតិបណ្ដាអង្គការជាដៃគូដែលបានចូលរួមគាំទ្រវេទិកាជាតិអន្តរសាសនាប្រឆាំងការជួញដូរមនុស្សនិងជំងឺរាតត្បាតសកល COVID-19 សូមបងប្អូនជនរួមជាតិនៅបន្តរក្សានិងអនុវត្តគោលការណ៍បង្ការទប់ស្កាត់និងវិធានការសុខាភិបាល3ការពារ3កុំឲ្យបានភ្ជាប់ភ្ជួរកុំធ្វើប្រហែសហើយត្រូវនាំគ្នាទៅចាក់វ៉ាក់សាំងការពារ COVID-19 ដែលរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលផ្ដល់ជូនដោយឥតគិតថ្លៃឲ្យបានគ្រប់គ្នាដើម្បីបង្កើតភាពស៊ាំជៀសផុតពីការឆ្លងនៃជំងឺរាតត្បាតដ៏កាចសាហាវនេះជាទីបញ្ចប់ទូលព្រះបង្គំខ្ញុំបកាណាខ្ញុំសូមថ្វាយព្រះពរចំពោះព្រះករុណាសម្ដេចព្រះនរោត្តមសីហមុនីព្រះមហាក្សត្រនៃព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជានិងសម្ដេចព្រះវររាជមាតាជាតិខ្មែរសូមព្រះអង្គទាំងពីរប្រកបដោយព្រះរាជសុខភាពបរិបូរណ៍ប្រកាយពលមុំមួនព្រះប្រាជ្ញាភ្លឺថ្លាដើម្បីគង់ជាមនុស្សដ៏ត្រជាក់ដល់កូនចៅប្រជារាស្ត្រកម្ពុជាសូមសម្ដេចព្រះមហាសង្ឃរាជទាំងពីរគណៈព្រះថេរានុថេរៈគ្រប់ព្រះអង្គមានប្រជញ្ញមាយុយឺនយូរព្រះសុខភាពល្អដើម្បីដឹកនាំសាសនាជាតិឲ្យបានរុងរឿងតរៀងទៅនិងសូមជូនពរសម្ដេចឯកឧត្តមលោកជំទាវអុកញ៉ាថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំក្រសួងស្ថាប័នលោកស្រីលោកគ្រូអ្នកគ្រូកងកម្លាំងប្រដាប់អាវុធគ្រប់ប្រភេទអាជ្ញាធរគ្រប់លំដាប់ថ្នាក់មន្ត្រីរាជការថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំនិងសាសនិកគ្រប់និកាយសាសនាសហគមន៍អន្តរជាតិសង្គមស៊ីវិលអ្នកសារព័ត៌មាននិងបងប្អូនជនរួមជាតិសូមមានសុខភាពល្អជៀសផុតពីជំងឺរាតត្បាតដ៏កាចសាហាវ COVID-19 និងសូមប្រកបដោយពុទ្ធពរនិងពរទាំង5ប្រការអាយុវណ្ណៈសុខៈពលៈនិងបដិភេណៈកុំបីឃ្លានគឺឡើយទូលព្រះបង្គំខ្ញុំប្រកាសណាខ្ញុំសូមប្រកាសបើកម្មវិធីបួងសួងនិងសូមព្រះបារមីដ៏ស័ក្តិសិទ្ធិនៃព្រះសម្មាសម្ពុទ្ធព្រះអល់ឡោះព្រះយេស៊ូវគ្រីស្ទនិងព្រះគ្រប់សាសនាព្រមទាំងបារមីវត្ថុស័ក្តិសិទ្ធិលើលោកប្រទានពរឲ្យពិភពលោករួចផុតពីគ្រោះនៃជំងឺរាតត្បាតសកល COVID-19 និងអំពើជួញដូរមនុស្សនិងគ្រោះមហន្តរាយទាំងឡាយដែលបំរុងកើតឡើង សូមឲ្យធូរស្រាលនិងសាបសូន្យបន្តិចម្ដងចាប់ពីពេលនេះតទៅសូមអរគុណ
You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. It's now up to provinces to decide on their own COVID-19 restrictions. The royal government of Cambodia ended its 3-week nationwide campaign to strengthen measures against COVID-19 on Thursday evening. It says the campaign has been successful in reducing community transmission of the virus. So, while you can buy booze and have a massage again in most parts of the country, that is not the case in Phnom Penh. The curfew is over across the entire country, but Phnom Penh's alcohol ban and suspension of high-risk businesses will continue until at least next Friday. A decision will be made by the capital administration in the next few days as to when high-risk businesses can finally reopen. They've been closed since March. The problem is pop-ups of the Delta variant. On Friday morning, a section of Street 144 on Riverside was sealed off for 3 days after a Delta case was detected. Local residents must now self-isolate for 21 days. Delta cases have also popped up in Sensok, Troy Changva and Mianche this week. Across the country, Phria Bahir becomes the first province to introduce new measures after the end of the government's nationwide campaign. It has declared a red zone for the entire Chom Kasan district through Friday, the 3rd of September. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Despite the ongoing COVID-19 situation in the kingdom, food prices remain stable. This is one of the key findings in a report released by the United Nations World Food Programme in partnership with the Agriculture Marketing Office in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. It says the national average retail prices for most key food commodities have shown only small fluctuations in both rural and urban markets. EAC News reporter Reo Soko has the details.
The National Food Price Trend Analysis shows that since January last year, domestic food prices have remained pretty stable. They did start to increasing last March when the pandemic first started, but then dropped again in January, just before the February 20 community transmission event began. With border closures and preventative measures disrupting supply chains, most basic commodities are up compared to the same period last year. The report specifies the prices of duck eggs, snakehead fish, and vegetable oil, but the price of pork and rice have dropped. Despite the continuing impact of COVID-19, the report shows that Cambodia's aggregate statistics of trade and agricultural production remain favorable. Although ongoing preventative measures means customer traffic at markets continues to drop, especially in the capital. The World Bank has estimated that the kingdom's GDP growth contracted by 3.1% in 2020, but is expected to grow by 4% in 2021.
Lockdowns, curfew, closures of high-risk businesses and borders. These are just some of the preventative measures that have affected the Cambodian economy. But the government has been quick in providing aid, especially in its cash support program. The Cambodian economy remains resilient. Raya Soko, EAC News, Phnom Penh.
You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. For the first time ever, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the Mekong River Commission have held a water security dialogue. The 2-day virtual meeting has been aimed at gathering solutions to address emerging challenges when it comes to water security in the region. The talks are expected to become a biennial event, with the next meeting already scheduled for 2023. The dialogue, which started on Thursday, is being built on the cooperation framework between ASEAN and the MRC, which aims to enhance expertise sharing and ensuring coordination for the better utilization of water and water-related resources. It serves as a platform to exchange novel ideas and identify possible areas for collaboration to further strengthen regional and local capacities in addressing water scarcity, water pollution, and water-related disaster risks such as floods and drought. The dialogue also includes interactive sessions with youth to stimulate discussions on youth-led, idea-driven advocacy for water security in the Mekong region. The Mekong River is one of the mightiest in Asia and is the world's 12th longest. It crosses through 6 countries: China, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And climate change means water security can no longer be guaranteed within its catchment basin. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Well, let's take a look now at news making headlines around the globe this Friday, the 20th of August. Afghanistan's Independence Day, celebrating its break from Britain in 1919, was marred by violence. Protesters took to the streets of more Afghan cities on Thursday as opposition to the Taliban spreads, with this group in the capital parading a long national flag through the streets. The flag has become a flashpoint for violence, with Afghans insisting that it, not the Taliban's, should remain the country's flag. Protesters have shouted, "Our nation, our flag," as they've marched in cities across the country just days after the Taliban takeover. They want assurance from the Taliban that they will not return to the brutal style of their previous rule between 1996 and 2001, when they severely restricted women's rights, staged public executions, and blew up ancient Buddhist statues. Over a dozen people have already been killed in scuffles over the flag nationwide. In the eastern town of Asadabad, several people were shot by the Taliban after tearing down its white flag in a city square. One struggling to maintain control. US forces fired tear gas and shots into the air to disperse crowds of Afghans at Hamid Karzai International Airport. The scenes at Kabul airport this week have focused the world's attention on whether countries have a duty to accept Afghans who are fleeing because of fear of persecution. The evacuation of Western citizens and Afghans who work for foreign governments continues. Dramatic footage out of Bolivia as a storm rips the roof off a local store and sends it careening into power lines. No one was injured, but a number of other buildings were badly damaged. Winter storms are not uncommon in Bolivia, but the intensity of this one caught many by surprise. There was even hail reported in several parts of the region. The storm conditions are expected to start easing going into the weekend. And the US Federal Trade Commission has refreshed its antitrust case against Facebook. It's added more detail on the accusation the social media company crushed or bought rivals. It's also once again asking a judge to force the social media giant to sell Instagram and WhatsApp. The expanded complaint effectively argues that Facebook is dominating the US personal social networking market. The FTC accuses Facebook of an illegal buy or bury scheme to crush competition. Facebook says it will continue to fight the lawsuit, describing it as meritless. It says its acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp were cleared many years ago and that its platform policies are lawful. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. UEFA has announced its shortlist for the 2020-2021 Player of the Year Awards. The nominees were selected from voting by the 24 national teams that featured at Euro 2020, as well as 80 coaches of clubs that played in the group stages of UEFA's competitions. Journalists from each of UEFA's 55 member associations also cast ballots. Manchester City's Kevin De Bruyne and Chelsea pair N'Golo Kante and Jorginho are in the running for Male Player of the Year award after topping the shortlist. All featured in Euro 2020. This year's shortlist is the first to feature only midfielders for the men's title as well as the women's. That shortlist is comprised of 3 players, all from Barcelona: Jennifer Hermoso, Lika Martins and Alexia Putellas. The shortlist for Men's Coach of the Year features Champions League finalist Pep Guardiola of Manchester City, Thomas Tuchel of Chelsea, and Italy's Roberto Mancini. The Women's Team Coach of the Year has 2 men in the running, with Barcelona's Luis Cortés and Sweden's Peter Gerhansen up against Chelsea's Emma Hayes. The winners will be named on the 26th of August. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Just weeks after Manny Pacquiao's match against Errol Spence Jr. was cancelled, Las Vegas has secured another big bout. Saul Canelo Alvarez will face Caleb Sweethands Plant for the undisputed super middleweight title in Las Vegas on the 6th of November.
Saul Canelo Alvarez!
Mexican Alvarez holds 3 168-pound titles, namely the WBC, WBA, and WBO belts. He's notched up 38 knockouts in his past 56 fights. He claimed his latest title when Billy Joe Saunders threw in the towel in the 8th round of their fight back in May. But American Plant is no pushover. He owns the 4th super middleweight title, the IBF belt. He's had 12 knockouts in 21 fights and remains undefeated. He successfully defended his title back in January with a unanimous decision over Caleb Truaz. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Belarusian sprinter Kristina Simanowskaya, who effectively defected during the Tokyo Olympics, says she plans to apply for Polish sporting citizenship so that she can run for the country. The 24-year-old sat down with the BBC in Warsaw. She says she hopes her application can be speeded up, as the process for sporting citizenship in Poland can take up to 3 years. Simanowskaya was the biggest headline of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. After criticizing her coaches on Instagram for not doing enough to combat doping, she was forcibly taken to the airport for a flight back to Belarus. After refusing to board, she fled to the Polish embassy in Tokyo and applied for asylum. She was due to fly directly to the country from Japan, but ended up flying to Poland via Vienna owing to concerns for her safety. She says Poland will now be her permanent home, and she wants to compete for the Polish national team as soon as possible. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Ending the week on the best news possible, the Museum of Ice Cream has opened its first international outlet in Singapore. Just $28 gets you free flow ice cream and a host of interactive exhibits. They're calling it your new happy place. And who could argue with that? A pond of sprinkles, some might call it a pond of pink eye, and all-you-can-eat ice cream, socially distanced, of course. The 60,000 square foot facility opened on Thursday following strict coronavirus guidelines, which include mandatory check-ins and vaccination certificates or a negative rapid test result. Singapore residents say it's a welcome break from the pandemic and great value for money. Head of Asia Pacific at Museum of Ice Cream Singapore, Pirakash T, says more international locations are being planned. We can only hope Phnom Penh gets in on the scoop. EAC News fully supports the Royal Government of Cambodia's preventative and administrative measures against COVID-19. But we need you to play your part in helping bring the 20 February community transmission event to an end. Wash your hands regularly, sanitize wherever possible. Keep an eye on your body temperature. Use the Stop COVID QR code and maintain a safe social distance. But above all, please, 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 wear a mask. Only together can we beat COVID-19. eArts Cambodia's audience is growing. Our YouTube channel now has 150,000 verified subscribers. To mark the milestone, we've received the Silver Creator Award from YouTube, given to channels with over 100,000 subscribers. YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki says the award celebrates eArts Cambodia's hard work and incredible achievement. She says not only has eArts Cambodia brought a unique voice and style to the world, but has also created valuable connections and built a community along the way. The next milestone we're going for is 1 million subscribers, and we'd really like that Gold Creator Award. So if you're not already a subscriber, head to www.youtube.com/eArtsCambodia. Subscribers get all the latest breaking news and updates from Cambodia in English. We'll see you there.
Vaccine COVID-19 គឺជាឧបករណ៍ថ្មីដ៏សំខាន់សម្រាប់ជួយទប់ស្កាត់ការរីករាលដាលនៃជំងឺ COVID-19
រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាបានយកចិត្តទុកដាក់ខ្ពស់ក្នុងការផ្តល់វ៉ាក់សាំងជូនដល់ប្រជាពលរដ្ឋអាយុចាប់ពី18ឆ្នាំឡើងទៅហើយថ្មីៗនេះរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលបានសម្រេចផ្តល់វ៉ាក់សាំងដល់កុមារនិងយុវវ័យអាយុចាប់ពី12ឆ្នាំដល់អាយុក្រោម18ឆ្នាំដើម្បីបង្កើតភាពស៊ាំក្នុងសហគមន៍និងអាចបន្តដំណើរការសង្គមសេដ្ឋកិច្ចតាមបែបគន្លងថ្មី
សូមមេដាបៃតាឬអាណាព្យាបាលដែលរស់នៅរាជធានីភ្នំពេញខេត្តកណ្ដាលខេត្តព្រះសីហនុនិងខេត្តកោះកុងនាំកុមារនិងយុវវ័យដែលមានអាយុចាប់ពី12ឆ្នាំដល់អាយុក្រោម18ឆ្នាំមកទទួលវ៉ាក់សាំងនៅតាមមូលដ្ឋានសុខាភិបាលតាមការណែនាំរបស់អាជ្ញាធរភូមិឃុំសង្កាត់ដោយស្ម័គ្រចិត្តនិងឥតគិតថ្លៃ សូមបន្តអនុវត្ត3ការពារ3កុំឲ្យបានខ្ជាប់ខ្ជួនគ្រប់គ្នាទោះបីបានចាក់វ៉ាក់សាំងគ្រប់ចំនួនដូសហើយក៏ដោយ
ហើយដោយអត់មានថយអីសោះ
ហេតុអីបានជាជំងឺ COVID-19 នៅតែឆ្លងច្រើនរាល់ថ្ងៃអញ្ចឹងយើងខំប្រឹងការពារដែរហ្នឹង
មកពីយើងទាំងអស់គ្នាហ្នឹងអនុវត្ត3កុំ3ការពារមិនបានត្រឹមត្រូវ
មិនត្រឹមត្រូវយ៉ាងម៉េចទៅលោកមេភូមិ
បងប្អូនមួយចំនួនគាត់ភ្លេចខ្លួនមិនអនុវត្ត3កុំ3ការពារជាពិសេសបងប្អូនមួយចំនួនគាត់មិនអនុវត្ត3កុំគាត់ទៅកន្លែងមានមនុស្សច្រើនកន្លែងបិទជិតមិនមានខ្យល់ចេញចូលល្អកន្លែងចង្អៀតដោយមិនបានអនុវត្ត3ការពារទេកន្លែងទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងធ្វើឲ្យការចម្លងវីរុស COVID-19 លឿនណាស់បើមានអ្នកណាម្នាក់មាន COVID-19 ចូលមកនោះវីរុសឆ្លងតគ្នាលឿនណាស់ហើយអ្នកទាំងនោះនាំទៅឆ្លងដល់គ្រួសារឆ្លងចូលភូមិទាំងរយអ្នកអញ្ចឹងទៅ
វិធានការ3កុំ3ការពារនេះសំខាន់ណាស់យើងគ្រប់គ្នាត្រូវចូលរួមអនុវត្តឲ្យបានត្រឹមត្រូវដើម្បីការពារមហន្តរាយដល់គ្រួសារយើងនិងសង្គមជាតិយើង
You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Pol Pot's last surviving henchman now has over a year to wait to learn if his appeal against his life sentence has been successful. Khieu Sampon's 4-day hearing came to an end on Thursday afternoon in the Supreme Court chamber of the Extraordinary Chambers in the Courts of Cambodia. The 90-year-old is serving a life term for genocide and crimes against humanity. EAC News reporter Reo Soko attended the final day of the hearing.
Khieu Sampon has strongly denied all allegations against him, the accusations which saw him sentenced to life in prison. Facing international prosecutors on Thursday, Sampon says he was only ever protecting the Cambodian people, protecting them against an invading army. He is referring to the Vietnamese of whom he was accused of committing genocide. He claims he knew nothing about Pol Pot's crimes. He says even to this day, he has no idea where genocide or any crimes against humanity were actually committed.
I declare that I cannot accept the accusation that I was involved in a plot to commit crimes against my compatriots, including the Cham or the Vietnamese. Many years after sitting as a defendant, at the end of this long case, it is important for me to inform you and especially inform the Cambodian people that I have never wanted to commit a crime against my compatriots or against anyone else. No matter what you decide, I will die in prison. I will die always remembering the suffering of my Cambodian people. I will die seeing that I am alone in front of you. I am judged symbolically rather than by my actual deeds.
Sampan has highlighted that he only ever wanted the Kingdom of Cambodia to have independence and sovereignty, where his compatriots could live together in harmony. The national and international prosecutors have said Sampan played a big role in decision-making, with him being head of state during the Khmer Rouge.
ពាក្យតងសាវនាការនេះមានសារៈសំខាន់ដោយសារតែការកាត់ទោសនេះគឺសិតតែជាលោកខៀវសំផននេះគឺជាប្រមុខរដ្ឋអតីតប្រមុខរដ្ឋអញ្ចឹងចង់និយាយថាតឡាការកូនកាត់ផងយើងនេះគឺកាត់ទោសសិទ្ធិមេដឹកនាំកម្ពុជាដែលទទួលបន្ទុកសំខាន់នៅក្នុងរបបសម័យ75ដល់79ការដំណើរការនៃការកាត់ក្តីជនជាប់ចោតនេះសិទ្ធិមេដឹកនាំកម្ពុជានេះបើសិនជាយើងធ្វើប្រហែសអាចនឹងមានអសន្តិសុខអញ្ចឹងមានការគិតគូរវែងឆ្ងាយរបស់រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលដឹកនាំដោយសម្ដេចតេជោដៃមួយគឺរយុទ្ធធរដល់ជនរងគ្រោះដែលឆ្លងកាត់ពីរបបបល្ល័ង្កពូជសាសន៍ខ្មែរក្រហមនិយាយចំទៅប្រជាជនខ្មែរទូទាំងប្រទេសនឹងតែម្ដងហើយចំណុចទី2ទៀតគឺរក្សាស្ថិរភាពសន្តិភាពនយោបាយឲ្យបានពីព្រោះយើងធម្មតាយើងដឹងហើយថាវាមានតំបន់ខ្មែរក្រហមអតីតខ្មែរក្រហមនៅអញ្ចឹងការកាត់នេះគឺថានិយាយចំទៅគឺដោយភាពប៉ិនប្រសប់ដំណើរការទៅរលូនអត់មានស្អីដែលបន្ទូប្រទេសឲ្យធ្វើឲ្យមានអសន្តិសុខនៅក្នុងតំបន់មានការច្បាំងរាំងជលអីផ្ទុះអាវុធអីអាហ្នឹង
According to court spokesperson Neth Piektra, it could be late next year before the court hands down its ruling, although National Co-Prosecutor Chia Liang says that they do not have a specific date, and while Sampan's age has to be considered, the matter must go through due process. His age has to be considered. The matter must go through due process.
Kia Sampan says that he is living his life in prison anyway. He cannot help but cry out loudly that the border problem between Cambodia and Vietnam still exists today. He insists that he committed no crime. But it'll up to the judges to examine all the grounds of Sampan's appeal and whether he'll end up dying in prison. Rhea Soko, EAC News at the Extraordinary Chambers in the Courts of Cambodia, Phnom Penh.
You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Cambodia has delivered its COVID-19 assistance to Myanmar. A government delegation led by Minister of Health Mam Bun Heng left Phnom Penh International Airport this morning. On board, cash aid and other medical equipment. The health minister was responsible for some precious cargo, $200,000 in cash, along with 3 million face masks, 500,000 rapid test kits, 2,000 sets of PPE, 100 oxygen generators, 20 ventilators, and 20 patient monitors. In offering the assistance earlier this week, Prime Minister Hun Sen also reconfirmed his pledge of $100,000 for Myanmar through the ASEAN Humanitarian Assistance Centre. That has now been matched by the Cambodian Red Cross in a donation to the Myanmar Red Cross. The cash and medical equipment couldn't have arrived soon enough in Myanmar, where COVID-19 cases are surging. As of Thursday, the country has 360,000 registered cases with 13,623 deaths. Back in June, barely 350 deaths had been reported. Prime Minister Hun Sen will deliver the opening speech for the 2021 National Interfaith Forum on Combating Human Trafficking. At 6 p.m. on Friday, all pagodas, temples, and churches in Cambodia, regardless of their religion, are being asked to ring their bells or beat their drums and offer prayers that the world will succeed in combating human trafficking. Minister of Cults and Religions, Chet Sokon, says the event has been held every year since 2017. He says at Friday's event, the Prime Minister will give a speech themed on bringing about a world free from human trafficking as well as COVID-19. With preventative measures in place, the ministry says any gatherings on Friday at 6 p.m. must be socially distanced and held outdoors. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Cambodia has rejected criticism from the U.S. Embassy over the jailing of union leader Rong Chun. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison this week for incitement over comments he made about Cambodia's handling of a border dispute with Vietnam. U.S. Ambassador W. Patrick Murphy tweeted on Wednesday that Chun's conviction raised serious questions about freedom of speech in the kingdom. EAC News reporter Reo Soko has more.
Ministry of Justice spokesperson Chin Malin says court procedure is not a suppression of freedom of expression. He says any party wanting to help Chun should have participated in court proceedings and given testimony. He was responding to Ambassador Murphy's tweet that Rong Chun's jailing raised serious questions about freedom of speech that is protected in Cambodia's constitution and is essential to the functioning of a democracy. The U.S. ambassador went on to say that the judicial system should not be abused to silence peaceful activists, but the Ministry of Justice says Chun's case was not an exercise in freedom of speech and that the authorities had a strong legal basis for judicial proceedings and convictions. Chin Malin added that legal means promote democratic processes in a society committed to the rule of law. Rhea Soko, EAC News.
You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Now for a look at news making headlines around the world this Thursday, the 19th of August. We begin in Afghanistan, where the security situation is rapidly deteriorating after a calm that lasted barely 24 hours. At least 3 people have been killed in anti-Taliban protests in Jalalabad after trying to replace the Taliban's flag with the national flag in the city center. The protests came amid news that an old resistance group called the Northern Alliance had been reformed and was advancing from the north. More trouble for the Taliban came from the man calling himself Afghanistan's rightful president, former Vice President Amrullah Saleh. Pictured here on the left, he says he's the country's rightful president after President Ashraf Ghani fled the country as the Taliban took control of the capital. Saleh took to Twitter from an undisclosed location to urge the armed forces and ordinary citizens to join the resistance. Security analysts fear Afghanistan is once again headed towards civil war. Tens of thousands of people in Argentina are staging protests throughout the country, demanding work for the unemployed and better housing. This march in the capital was convened by a group of social organizations and led by the Polo Obrero, a social organization affiliated to the left-wing Workers' Party. Protesters are also asking for more social programs, public works programs, and food assistance through soup kitchens. And Greek firefighters are at it again on the outskirts of Athens. They're battling a wildfire in one of the last remaining pine forests outside the capital. The village of Vilia, together with 6 others, has been evacuated along with a nursing home. More than 400 firefighters, including 143 from Poland, along with an army of volunteers, are battling the blaze. The fire started on Monday and is being fanned by strong winds. More than 500 wildfires have broken out in recent weeks across Greece, ravaging swathes of pristine forest and forcing the evacuation of thousands of people. The country has seen some of its highest temperatures in decades. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Italy's standout star from Euro 2020, Manuel Locatelli, has completed his loan move to Juventus from Turin's Sassuolo. The deal includes a $40 million obligation to buy the player at the end of the 2022-23 season, with terms and conditions. The 23-year-old midfielder scored twice in Italy's 3-0 group stage win over Switzerland to help it secure a berth in the last 16. It was a pivotal game, with Italy going on to win the tournament. Locatelli has scored 3 times for Italy in 15 appearances. He's a welcome addition at Juventus, with it having endured a difficult campaign last season. The defending champions finished 4th in Serie A. They begin their 2021-22 season at Udinese on Sunday. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Austria's Dominic Thiem will not defend his US Open title. The world number 6 withdrew from the tournament late on Wednesday after injuring his wrist. Sadly, he will not be repeating this image from last year's US Open at Flushing Meadows. Thiem suffered the wrist injury back in June at the Mallorca Open. It also meant he missed out on Wimbledon. He took to Twitter on Wednesday night to say that his wrist wasn't much better and that he'd missed the rest of the 2021 season. This is the second year running that the defending champion at Flushing Meadows has withdrawn from the tournament. Last year, it was Rafael Nadal who pulled out because of the pandemic. The US Open runs from the 30th of August to the 12th of September. You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. The 2021 Japanese Formula One Grand Prix that was due to be held in October has been cancelled. Organisers cited ongoing concerns about what else but COVID-19. Suzuka was due to host the Grand Prix over the second weekend of October. Its cancellation follows that of Singapore's night race that was scheduled to be held the weekend before. Formula One says it is now working on the details of a revised calendar. Details are expected to be released in the coming weeks. Formula One has been operating under strict health protocols these past 18 months, with teams in bubbles and frequent testing for all personnel and media. But the cancellation of the Suzuka edition could spell trouble for the Turkish Grand Prix, which was added to the calendar as a replacement for the cancelled race in Singapore.